Amen.
Restart.
Whoops, we were muted. Go ahead.
Oh, Christians don't give their all to God because they're distracted by greed or doing good. And I have a story that explains this. So last week, I described some of the opposition we faced during our engagement. Well, before any of that happened, I was actually in opposition of our marriage. And what I mean by that is this. Before I met Alex, I had a plan. I wasn't going to date for a year, and I was going to somehow pursue full-time ministry or mission work. Now, one would say that those are good things, right? Like, that doesn't seem distracting or dishonoring to God. But these were my own plans, and I hadn't truly given my all to God because I was still holding on to those desires with a closed fist, trying to avoid where He was leading me. God was leading me. When Alex started pursuing me, I already felt like God was showing me that He would be my future husband, but I was so distracted by my plan, which is so weird even saying because I'm not even like the planner type. But it wasn't until a moment of surrender during worship at the church we both went to that I let go of what I thought was right. So sometimes the things we desire are not bad at all. They're often really, really good things. Yet the Lord knows what's really, really good for us specifically in each season and at each appointed moment. You know, if you really think about it, I was distracted by both greed and good. Yeah. The good being obvious, not wanting to be focused on a dating relationship and wanting to be in the mission field. But it was also greedy because before I surrendered, it was all about what I was going to do and my freedom to do it. Yeah. But saying yes to marriage and motherhood, God placed me in a place where I can be on mission day to day, and it eventually led us to this ministry. Not all my doing, I don't mean that, but with my amazing husband, who is going to unpack this text and help you understand why, as Christians, we must live undistracted by greed and good. Before we do that, though, we just want to take a moment to thank all of you. We are a Christ-centered, countercultural, nonprofit preaching podcast made possible by you. Because of you, we've been able to buy cameras, microphones, equipment, and even some diapers with your support. And so we just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We cannot do this without you. If you would like to donate today, you can visit www.amenchurch.live or click the link in our description.
Amen.
Well, I do not like the YouVersion Bible app. It's because it's distracting. I got on there a couple days ago after reading a book, and it quoted Romans 2. So I went on the Bible app because it was the closest thing to me to look up this verse. And as I looked it up, I saw like what my friends are reading in different parts of California, the plans they're reading. I saw a bunch of false prophets right up next to like sound biblical teachers. Like the false prophets' plans would pop up next to the sound guys, and I'm like, oh, there's so many different sides of the spectrum when it comes to like truth on here. And then like one of the first things is that like the video Bible devotionals that are on there, they kind of look like TikToks, and I was just so distracted. Like there's so many different like Christian influencers popping up on there, and I was just like, I'm just trying to read the Bible. I just want to get alone with God, and I need a word. You know, I'm trying to look up this verse, and it was just so distracting. And I think the reason why is because the people who own it, they're distracted by greed and by good. And every Christian is distracted by these two things. Greed in the sense of, let's throw all these different influencers on here, whether they're biblical or non-biblical, just, you know, to make more money, just for better marketing. And then also by good, because yeah, it is good that they give you the option to basically have like a type of social media where you can see what parts of the Bible your friends are highlighting. That's good stuff, but it's distracting. And the Bible app is kind of like those pants that have the zipper at the knee where you can cut them off and turn them into shorts. There's a reason why no one wears those anymore, and that's because it's tacky. Most of the time, we just need pants or we need shorts. And most of the time, I just need my Bible or I need my apps. I don't need them both at once. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's complete. I mean, maybe there's a time where you're caught up in the mountains and it was cold at the beginning of your hike and now it's warm and you want to zip off your shorts for some reason. Go ahead. But what I'm saying is most of the time we need to just put our phone down. Most of the time, we need to just pick up our Bible and get alone with God so we don't get distracted by greed and good knocking at your door all the time. Well, in Mark 14, there's a young lady, and she is undistracted by greed and good. And I think we can learn so much from her. I was so just encouraged and inspired by her. And there's like this feminist movement out right now, and it's been around for a long time. And they're always like, well, the Bible just beats down on women and doesn't allow women to shine. And I'm like, are we reading the same Bible? Because most of the time in the Bible, it's women who are showing the men, hey, you guys are getting it wrong. And don't get me wrong, back in biblical days, the way women were treated was really bad. They were treated less than human by, people in authority, but never by God, never by Jesus. In fact, the very first lady to run into the resurrected Jesus, the very first person was a lady, Mary Magdalene. In this story, Jesus is juxtaposing this woman in the story against the greedy religious leaders and the greedy disciples, a.k.a. Judas. He's saying, look at this lady. Look at what she does. And we're going to look at it. Well, let me read it for us, and then we'll jump in. Mark 14. Am I on the right page? No, I'm not. Mark 14, 3-9. And while he was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at the table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment and pure nard, very costly, and broke the flask and poured it over his head. So he's in Bethany. Bethany is like in the Mount of Olives. It's about 2 miles from Jerusalem, and he's reclining at the table. The way that they ate was like on one elbow. They would lean as they ate. It was, showing us that back at that time, eating and spending time with people and talking was so important to God. It was so part of their culture. Nowadays, we eat in the car. We eat, probably illegally, fries and cheeseburgers as we're driving around, eating tacos. We don't sit down at the table together, but this is what life is about. This is what life has always been about. Good food, good conversation, good friends. That is the essence of life. Like, that is what God meant us to experience. In heaven, we're going to do just that. Jesus is called food. He's called bread of life, the living water. He's referred to of that. He tells people in the book of John, eat me, eat of me, eat my flesh, drink my blood. He's saying what life is about is communing deeply with each other, and especially with God the Father. That's what it means to be a Christian, to be communing with him all the time by constantly eating of Jesus's flesh, his life, his resurrection, reminding us the goodness of God by mentally taking him into our body. That's what it's all about. He's the Son of Man is leaning at this table, and what happens? This lady comes up, and she has this very expensive stuff called spikenard. Spikenard was taken from an Indonesian plant, and it's like basically squeezed. The spike is squeezed so that this oil comes out of it. It smells completely delicious. As soon as you heard and saw this lady crack this flask open, you would have smelled it all throughout the house. The smell would have filled the house. Likewise, as Christians, we are a sweet fragrance unto the Lord because Jesus died. He resurrected from the grave, showing that he had this perfect sacrifice. That sacrifice was poured onto us, and now it's transformed us. It's given us new life, and so our life now is pleasing to God. All the time in the Old Testament, when the priest would walk into the Holy of Holies, they would light incense. They would have this pleasing smell. There's times in the Old Testament, God would say, I hate the smell of what you guys are doing. Your life smells like crap to me, and I don't want to smell it. Your sin has lifted up from the camp, and now it's up in my throne room, and it makes me disgusted. But because of Christ, now we smell good to God. He is pleased with us because his sacrifice covers us, and we've been completely made right in his eyes.
Wow. So
shouldn't we live right? Shouldn't we live in a way that is pleasing to God? Shouldn't we walk into a room and all of a sudden the fragrance of the room just changes? Because it's like, man, something's different now that this person's here. We all know those people who walk into a room and then everything gets bad. It's just like, what is that? Oh, come on. This person, we all know people like that because they can't control their mouth. They're rude. They're cynical. They're gossipy. They just are flippant. They joke around too much. That person walks in the room. You're like, I'm ready to leave. Just like you're ready to leave a room that smells like someone just took a dump in it. You're ready to leave a room like that. Well, God says, be like this lady. Pour out your life in such a way that when you're around, people are like, I like this person. There's something different. Our life as a Christian should be like that because it should smell like Christ. Now look at this. It says, this is very costly. We know it's very costly because back at this time, it tells us that a bottle or a flask of spikenard was probably came out to like 365 denarii. So it may have cost an entire year to buy a bottle like this, a year's worth of wages. Now, I went to AT&T a couple days ago, and this guy was there, and he was yelling at the lady that worked there. And she was the sweetest lady. She was just telling us how, she bought a new phone for her son. He's like 9 years old, and she has to constantly turn off the phone, and she works at AT&T, so she knows how to turn it off, so the service doesn't work, so he can go outside and ride his bike or do something. And she's sweet, funny, and she's telling us how she had to work all throughout COVID, and then now that COVID's over, nobody wants to come back to work. They're all used to just watching Netflix all day, and so she and one other person has been like holding down the fort at AT&T. And lo and behold, here comes a guy yelling and screaming at her saying, I spent $20,000 over the last 13 years at this place, and I want my money back. I want a new phone. And I was getting so upset. I was there with my mother-in-law and my wife, and luckily my father-in-law called at the perfect time, and I had to go pick him up. But I had some choice words I wanted to share with this guy because he was acting out of greed. Mm-hmm. He didn't see the goodness of God in this girl, the image of God in this girl. He saw dollar signs, and because of that, he was treating her poorly. Mm-hmm. Jesus was never distracted from God's goodness by greediness. Never. Matthew 17, he gets asked by these guys, can you pay the temple tax? He looks over to Peter and says, Peter, do the kings of this earth ask taxes from their family? Peter says, of course not. The kings don't tax their sons. They tax other people in the kingdom. And Jesus says, well, likewise, I don't need to pay. My God, my Father owns everything. And now that you are a part of God's family, you don't have to pay temple tax. The temple belongs to God, and we are God's. But he's saying, so that we don't offend them, I want you to grab your fishing pole, go get a fish. Inside that fish's mouth is going to be enough coins to pay the temple tax. Jesus didn't even have coins. He didn't even have enough money to pay the temple tax. You see this? He was so rich spiritually, and he was so rich in power. He could have had ultimate riches. He could have had all the gold in the universe. He could turn little stones into pure gold if he wanted to. He didn't use his power to do that. Instead, he was poor. He didn't even have enough money to pay the temple tax. He was so undistracted from God's goodness by the greediness of the world. I want to live like that. Mm-hmm. The Bible tells us in Psalms 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Meaning, the reason why God doesn't give you the desires of your heart most of the time is because those desires will destroy you. But he says, if you delight in me, what's going to happen is you're going to see what's really important. You can't delight in the God of the universe and think unimportant stuff is important at the same time. When you delight in God, when you delight in him and you see him and you chew on him and you love him deeply, what happens is the stuff that you thought was so important all of a sudden is not important. Tim Keller tells a story of this girl who's like 14, comes into his office and says, I just don't know if I can do this anymore. He's like, what are you talking about? Well, what good is the gospel and all the great things that the Bible tells me if no one at my school, not one boy at my school will look at me? In that moment, she's realizing that she's not really delighting in God because there's other things like boys that are more important. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to explain to a 14-year-old girl why God is more, important than guys. That's a hard thing to do. But if you focus on God, if you delight in God, if you look at him, if you find joy in him, you spend time with him, what happens is your heart starts to change. You start to realize like, oh, wait a second. My perspective's off. My priorities are off. What I find important is off. And then God says, you delight in me like that, I will give you the desires of your heart. I have no problem giving you the desires of your heart. Because now I realize that you are delighting in the right things. Jesus says, seek first the kingdom, Matthew 6:33. And all these, seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, all these things will be added unto you. He says, whatever you think that you need in life, whatever your desires are, whatever the things that you say that you need to live this life, if you just focus on me and you seek the kingdom, I will make sure to take care of it completely for you. All you need to do as a Christian is seek the kingdom. Seek the kingdom and his righteousness. I will take care of the rest. It's a very simple way to live. Only Christianity offers this. Every other religion says you need to seek your own goodness. You need to seek the goodness of others. You need to seek, this thing. You got to do this. You got to appease the gods in this way. Jesus says, I just want you to seek me, and then I'll take care of the rest. You seek me, and you'll be an awesome neighbor, an awesome brother, an awesome sister, an awesome employee. The things that are getting you down and distracting you and hurting you, all these things, they will all make sense if you just seek me first. Just put me first. Finances, all those things, what you think you need, the stuff you need to buy, just seek me first. I will take care of all that. He says, do not worry about tomorrow and what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat. Don't worry about that. If we worry about tomorrow and about money, after Jesus just said in Matthew 6:34, not to do it, we're sinning. He says, do not worry. And then what do? We worry. We're completely, if I say, do not grab cookies out of the cookie jar, and then I see my son grab cookies out of the cookie jar, he just deliberately disobeyed me in front of me. This is like when Simba goes to, the elephant graveyard after Mufasa tells him not to. And he gets caught there by some hyenas, and then Mufasa comes in and roars, and he takes Simba out, and he says, Simba, you deliberately disobeyed me. And I can hear God say that to me so many times when I'm choosing to worry. Worry is a choice. Stress is a choice. Giving in to anxiety is a choice. Anxiety is a temptation to worry. Anxiety and worry are different, right? Anxiety, being anxious, is the temptation to worry. We feel the anxiety come on, that's the temptation. We give into it, that's the sin. That's the worry. He says, do not worry. Don't do it. Don't give into it. Instead, I want you to think about the fact that I will take care of everything if you just seek me first. Most of the time, we're worried about greed and about money, and we don't give our everything like the lady in our story, Mark 14. We're distracted by greed because we think that we need to be God. The reason why we're distracted by greed is because we think, if I have this money, if I have these things figured out, I will be like God. What does that sound like? It sounds like the fall of mankind in Genesis. The serpent says, I take the fruit and eat it because he knows you're going to be like him. Mm-hmm. Adam and Eve do it. Why? Adam and Eve wanted to be God. You know what they thought? They thought it would be pretty cool to be God. It'd be pretty cool to just be able to eat of any tree we want to eat from and to call our own shots. That sounds fun. Why don't we do that? And so they tried to be God, and it backfired. The whole entire world fell into sin. And every time, this is why the love of money in the book of Timothy is the root of all evil. Not money itself. Money is good. We're going to talk about that next. Mm-hmm. Good things that are distracting. But the love of money is the root of all evil. Why? The root of all evil is trying to be God. This is how everything started. If you love money, you love its power. You love what it can do for you. You love what you can use to do upon other people. You love the power of money. That's why you love it. And so that is the root of all evil. Trying to be God. I can now exercise whatever. Travis Scott at his concert, 8 people just died, 300 injured. Why? The love of money. He knows satanic stuff sells. It's always sold, guys. Most of these guys are like, I'm in the Illuminati. I drink blood out of a baby's skull. Most of these guys who say that in their songs, they're not really doing it. They just want to give off this illusion of evil because it's intriguing. When we see a dark room, we want to know what's inside. When we see a dark box, we're like, okay, what's in there? There's mystery involved with darkness. And so they put it in their songs, they put it on the album covers, they put it at their concerts to sell people. But what happens is when people travels too far into the darkness, what happens is they get hurt. It's like walking into a dark room without any light. You stub your toe, you trip. People, when they go further into darkness, what happens is they get hurt. And that's what happens at Travis Scott's concert. He wasn't, I don't think Travis was intentionally trying to hurt people physically, but he had no problem hurting people spiritually in order if it made him money. The love of money is the root of all evil. And now we got to deal with the consequences. If you're distracted from God's goodness by your greediness, you will ultimately die and go to hell, period. You will die and have eternal separation from God if you are distracted by more. Another story, in The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, there's a kid named Eustace. Eustace is the cousin of Lucy, Edmund, everyone in the Chronicles of Narnia, and they go to Narnia with him. One day he travels into a cave. In this cave, he finds treasure. And he's looking at this treasure. He's like, oh, I'm not telling anyone about this treasure. I'm keeping this treasure for myself. No one knew where he was. So he was like in this cave looking at the treasure. And all of a sudden, he feels this warm air on his back. He's like, what is that? What is this? Someone else in this cave with me? And then he hears like something like dragging along the rocks. He's like, what is going on here? He's terrified. And so he starts running out of the cave. And then he turns around and he sees a giant tail behind him. And he's like, oh my goodness, there is a dragon right on top of me. So he starts sprinting. He looks in front of him. He sees giant paws from a dragon, scales slamming the ground in front of him. It's right on top of him. It's about to grab him. He comes out into the daylight and he looks down into a pond of water and he sees a dragon looking back at him. His greed had turned him into a dragon, a selfish, disgusting, scaly, cold-hearted dragon. He transformed into that. What you love, you will transform into. If you love more, if you love greed, if you love getting more out of life, you will turn into that. You will turn into this disgusting, lonely, weird person. I think it's like kind of clever that we call, Zuckerberg and all these guys like reptilian overlords and stuff like that. There's people who actually think that Mark Zuckerberg is a reptile. I think you're crazy. I think he's a human. But I think when you have so much power and you have so much greed, it can turn you into something that you don't even recognize anymore. What is going on? This metaverse, Facebook's Oculus, all this stuff. What is going on? What we're turning into something as a people that we don't even recognize. We look more like our avatars than we do like humans.
Wow.
What is going on? It's because we're just so distracted by more, by greed. We're not living simply like the woman in our story. Verse 4 says, there was some who said to themselves indignantly, I'm going to skip that word. Why was the ointment wasted like that? What a waste, they were saying. What a waste. Why would this lady take this expensive, beautiful ointment that was used as a fragrance to smell good, a way to bless someone? Why would she use it, all of it, to pour onto Jesus' head? Why would she? It's a waste. They said the same thing about Christ's death. What a waste, this guy. He is so powerful. He's a great teacher. He has miracles. What a waste. Jesus poured his blood out in waste. They thought it was just a waste. They didn't know what he was really doing. They didn't know what this lady was really doing. And Jesus stops them and says, hey, whoa. Verse 5, it says, this ointment could have been used and sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor. He says, leave her alone. Jesus defends her. If you are being obedient to God, understand that God will always defend you. It's his battle to fight. Vengeance is his. Mm-hmm. We don't have to stick up for ourselves. You understand that? We need to live for God, trust him, stand up for him. And he says, I will defend you. Maybe not right away. Maybe you'll get bullied. Maybe you'll get made fun of. Every single person that was killed for their faith in Christ, guess where they are right now? Sitting next to the King of the universe, the King of the galaxies. People who were burned at the stake. People who were shot in the face by people in Pakistan, the Pakistani Christians. We think, oh my gosh, what a waste of their life. They just died like a horrible little just victim. Why would they die like that? Guess what? They're in heaven right now, sitting with the King. They're cruising with Abraham, Peter, Paul, the goats of our religion. the goats of what we believe, the greatest of all times, they're cruising with them. Jesus says, I will defend you. Nobody who picks a fight for you as you stand up for me will be able to fight against my vengeance towards them. Jesus says, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done something beautiful for me. For you'll always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. Right here, he's quoting Deuteronomy 15. Jesus came up with this really cool plan in the Old Testament to get rid of... Did the camera just shut off? I don't know what happened.
Do you want me to try restarting it?
Yeah, maybe turn it off and turn it back on. I'll just keep talking. So Jesus, it's overheated. Interesting.
Okay, but is it still...
I don't know how to fix that. I guess turn it off. Okay, so I know it's a black screen right now, but everyone else listening, you guys can still hear me. So Jesus came up with this great thing in the Old Testament called the, on the 7th year is a sabbatical year. On the sabbatical year, what would happen is everyone would forgive the debts of anybody who owed them debts. And so it was really cool. People would be able to realize, the 7th year, the sabbatical year is coming. I have all this debt. I get a reset this year. And that was so encouraging to them because now they know that I'm not going to just let my debt increase. So Jesus, as he quotes, it was working when you turned it back on just now.
Oh, it was still shining overheating.
Oh, it's okay, whatever. So yeah, they would not have to have their debt increase like crazy. And so Jesus right here, he's quoting this verse and says, you're always going to have the poor with me. We can figure out how to help the poor. The poor is important to me. Of course, I want you to help the poor. He says that over and over again, help the poor. If you don't care about the poor, you are a very, very poor Christian, or maybe not a Christian at all. Because all of us, Matthew 5, are poor in spirit. Jesus is rich in spirit. We're poor in spirit. Spiritually, we have no dinero to give to God. We're spiritually poor. If you don't understand that, then you're not truly a Christian. So of course you should help the poor. But what he's saying is you got to have priorities. She is not distracted by good works when she's giving to God right here. Our daughter Lucy just started crawling and she's putting everything in her mouth. Shoes, little tiny Legos, things that aren't food items. She's realizing that all these things around me are so good. There's so much good thing in life and I just want to put it all, I just want to, take all of it. And she's realizing that, wait a second, I can't do that. And our job as parents is to show her that good things have places. Good things have times to be focused on. And in verse 7 of Mark 14, Jesus says, the poor will always be here. I want you to focus on me in this moment. In that moment, this lady was giving her all to God, and everyone else is like, you need to give that all to this. And Jesus is like, no. I want her to give her all to me right now and focus on the poor later. We have to teach Lucy that growing up means knowing where good things go. That Jesus is the ultimate good. He should always be focused on because there's no one more good, nothing more good than him. But good things go in good places. And there's times to remember where the priorities go. When it comes to time with the Lord, when it comes to living this life as a Christian, God comes first. Jesus comes first. As soon as these priorities get out of whack, your life will get out of whack. Jesus was never distracted from God's will by good works. John 11, he waits several days for his closest friend, one of his closest friends, to die. And then he goes, and right before he resurrects him, he knows all things. He knows he's going to resurrect him. As soon as he's about to resurrect him, he breaks down, starts weeping. Why, Jesus? You know your friend died. You allowed him to die. He was sick. You waited several days. You allowed him to die. And then you came to resurrect him. We know because we read on the second part of the story. We know you're going to resurrect him. Why are you crying right now if you know everything? Why are you weeping? He's so overwhelmed by God's will. As he resurrects this guy, Lazarus, he's thinking about his resurrection that he's going to have. The resurrection that God has promised him because of his perfect life and sacrifice. He is overwhelmed by the goodness and the surrender that he has given to God's will. He's overwhelmed by it and he's weeping. He's just so dead center in the middle of God's will. It's overwhelming. It's a mixture of weeping with joy and weeping with being overwhelmed at the same time. Why? Because he's so in love with God. He's given everything to God in this moment. It's amazing how centered he is. I know the camera turned off again. But listen to us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts if you just want to listen. I'm sorry it turned off. But check this out. Jesus was never distracted by God's will. Or Jesus was never distracted from God's will by good works. Matthew 7:22. Didn't I do good works? Get away from me. I don't even know who you are. People were doing good works most of their life and still went to hell because good works don't get you to heaven. Being in love with the good Savior of the universe gets you to heaven. Knowing that God's good grace has covered you completely, that's what gets you into heaven, not good works. Don't be distracted by good works. Galatians 3:1, Paul says, who bewitched you? Who cast a spell on you to make you believe that you can get into heaven by doing good works? No. Only by God's grace do you get into heaven, and through that, you realize good works is how my life needs to look because I'm covered with God's grace. A heart that knows that God is gracious towards you is a heart that'll do good works. But don't be so distracted by something good that you miss God. That's what this lady in the story shows us. She says, yeah, we'll help the poor later. Right now, I got Jesus in front of me. I need to focus on him. So what do we do? What do we do if we're distracted by greed, by good works? What do we do? Me and my son Lion went on a date this week. And on the date, he gets in the car and he's just woke up. He's ran out of bed. He knew that it was his day. His Wednesday date was here. We do this every other week. He was so excited. He's just talking, spilling out every little detail of everything that he sees. We went to the ocean. We saw this big thing called spouting horn. It was beautiful. And then we went to this little pond. And the whole time, I'm telling you, this kid was nonstop talking. Didn't miss a beat. And I thought, why? He says, I got my Father in front of me, and I'm not going to waste any second of this. I'm going to share with him everything that's on my heart. The things that I can't share with him because my brothers and my sister isn't around, I'm sharing with him now. Why? I have his full attention, and so I want to use every ounce of it. Mark 14:36, Jesus is praying in the garden, and he says, God, if there's any other way, yet not my way, your will be done. If there's any time for Jesus to be, tempted in every way, like it says in Hebrews, it was in the garden when he was about to die for the sins of mankind, and he was going to undergo the worst thing that anyone in this entire universe will ever go through. Jesus went through that, and then right before that, he was like, you know what, if there's any other way, he was tempted to maybe think, okay, maybe we got to do this way or this will. But he says, not my will, your will be done. He never sinned. He never gave into it. He says, I have my Father right here. I'm going to tell him everything. But yet at the end of this, his will, not mine. Jesus was never distracted from God's will by good works. He would have thought, okay, you know what if I just stay a couple more years and just do some more miracles? What if I just help a couple more people? And he wasn't even distracted by that. By good things, by good works. He was undistracted. He said, God's will. So the answer is we got to go to God like Lion is going to me and just pour out everything. Get alone with him and share everything with him. Share everything with him. That's how you live undistracted. When you get alone with God, you share, you pour out everything. And what happens? The things that you thought were so important to you right then before that prayer, they turn so unimportant right before your eyes. As you pour out yourself and you delight in God and you tell him everything that's on your heart, every little thought that comes to your mind, you share everything. What happens is the things that you thought were important, they're not important anymore. So my question is, what is distracting you?
Man, that's so good. What is distracting you? This is just so important to understand because there really are distractions everywhere. And that's why our relationship with Jesus is crucial. It's vital and really the only solution, because what we're talking about here is being distracted by good things. So like Alex and I won't be able to tell you what those distractions are, but the Holy Spirit will. James says that if you need wisdom, ask for it and it will be given to you. And I remember a few chapters back in Mark 11, he says, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe, and it will be given to you. It'll be yours. And so, man, we just see how vital really getting at the feet of Jesus is. And that, all the other things just, they don't matter. Another verse I love is Psalm 111:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All those who practice it have good understanding. His praises endure forever. So we have to really know him. We have to fear him, have reverence for him and respect, because what we do absolutely matters in this life, but we don't have to walk around anxious or without hope, because if we fear him, he'll give us understanding and we'll know the right way to go,
That's so heavy.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And these verses are verses that I would just kind of try to commit to memory, because these are great verses that go along with what I'm saying. The Psalms, 111, focusing, putting our focus on him. And it's more than that. It's realizing that he's with you wherever you go. And it's finding time to pray. All these guys in the Old Testament, Daniel, he's praying so much it gets him in trouble. He gets thrown in the lion's den. Prayer was such an important thing to him. And we neglect, how do we think that we are headed towards heaven if we don't spend any time with God in prayer? Prayer is just talking to God. It's if we don't, what do you think we're going to do when we get to heaven? Spend time with him and talk to him. That's what eternity is going to be about. But yet right now, we don't even do it. It's one of the hardest things to do too. So don't think, I'm a poor Christian because I'm not praying a lot. Prayer is hard, very hard to do. The Bible tells us when Jesus is praying in the garden that all of his best friends, they fell asleep. And Jesus says what? The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And I realize every time I pray, I realize how willing the spirit is, but how weak my flesh is. It's hard for me to focus on prayer with God because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you guys for being here. It's so ironic that we're talking about distractions, and for the first time ever, our camera
We're so distracted
went
by
out.
technology.
Yeah. But the people who are listening to just the audio on Spotify and Apple and Google, they're like, I'm not distracted. This is fine.
Yeah.
They're used to not having the video part of it, but we'll try to work out the kinks. If you'd like to donate, amenchurch.live. We might have to buy a new camera today. So your donations, they really do go to helping our ministry. We don't just say that you guys are everything to us. You allow us to keep preaching the gospel, so we can just focus on the message. You guys, do that for us. So thank you. And with that said, we love you, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Yes. Go out and be the church.
Amen.